All right, now let's continue with the test one material and let's look at trying to graph an inequality like y less than x squared minus 5 is my example. Okay, so what you do on these is a two-part process. First, you graph the boundary. So first you're going to graph the line y equals x squared minus 5. And you'll do that by should know that it's a parabola because you see the squared. So you should be thinking it's a parabola like this, but you can plug in a couple points to kind of see where it's going to be. So if you plug in a 0, you'd get -5. Plug in a 1, you'd get 1 squared, which is 1 minus 5. Plug in a -1. This you might need to see. -1 squared would be 1 minus 5. It would also be -4. So then you can sketch the boundary. You know it's going to be passing through the point 0, -5, 1, -4, and -1, -4. Now, before you actually draw it, you need to look at how this is not equal to, okay? Not or equal to, right? It's not this, okay? So dashed. Kind of remember that dashing versus making it solid. So we're going to come in here and we're going to dash it. Okay, so that's supposed to be a dash parabola showing you the boundary. These are the boundary between the points that work and the points that don't work. Now we need to know whether it's going to be inside or outside, might be a way to think about it. Okay, so what you do for that, that's the second part, is what I normally do is use a test point, okay, to determine the shading. So you got to determine how to shade. And I just use a test point. So an easy test point, if it's available, if it's not on the boundary, you can use it, is 0, 0. So you go back to your original inequality and you plug in a 0 for y and a 0 for the x, and you ask yourself, is that true? Okay, so this is actually kind of tricky. A lot of people mess this up. Here's 0, here's -5. Okay, no, 0 is not less than -5. Okay, so your answer to that question is a no. Well, that means you better not have that be the shaded part. So instead, you're going to shade right here. And remember how you take the bucket and you kind of dump it to shade that region. Okay, so that's graphing just a single inequality. All right, what happens on the next couple is you're graphing what's called a system of inequalities. Okay, so number 9, you're graphing 2 lines. Number 10, you're graphing a line and a parabola at the same time. Okay, and then on number 11, you're doing a circle and a line. All right, so let's go ahead and maybe look at, I don't know. Just want to do one more, maybe number 10. Okay, so on number 10, you've got 2 inequalities. One of them has a linear look, and then the other one, see how it has a squared in it? Okay, so on both of them, you're going to graph the boundary of each. Okay, so just the equal to. And you're going to do that by looking for some ordered pairs. All right, you kind of do them one at a time. I'm just getting them all set up. Okay, so first I'm going to graph the line. I'm going to plug in a 0 for x, and I can see that y would have to be 2. Plug in a 0 for y, I see x would have to be 4. Don't mess those up. 0, 2 is here. 4, 0 would be on the x. Okay, when I look back, I see that it wasn't or equal to, so that's going to be solid. So I'm going to graph that solid line. Okay, both of these are going to be solid, aren't they? I usually look at that and decide it over here, so I don't forget to do that. All right, now before I move on to the other inequality, I'm going to test a point. So I'm going to test 0, 0 to see if it is a solution. So I'm going to plug in a 0 for the x. I'm going to plug in a 0 for the y. Okay. And I'm going back to the inequality and asking if that's true. So is 0 less than or equal to 4? And the answer is yep. Okay, so I know that when I do my final answer, I need to be sure I'm shading below that line. Okay, so that was the first one. Okay, we got that one kind of done. Now the second one I can tell is a parabola. So again, we could plug in a 0 and y would be -1. If you plug in a 1 for x, the y would be 0. And a -1 for x would also be 1 minus 1, which would be 0. Or you could do something a little further away, like plug in a 2 and see how that would be 4 minus 1. Plug in a -2, 4 minus 1. Okay, you could get a few points there. So basically, it's going to be a parabola opening up, got a cross here and here, and then 2, 3, and -2, 3. Has some nice symmetry, okay, and it was going to be solid, making a nice U. And what you're looking for are those points of intersection. And so you're doing this problem by graphing, okay? Well, actually, you're not just looking for those points of intersection. I take that back. We're not just solving the equals. So we're really not on this one. We don't really care that much about finding those points in particular. It's more the shading I should have talked about. Okay, so now let's plug in the 0 for the y and the x in that one. So 0 greater than 0 squared minus 1. Is 0 bigger than or equal to -1 is the question. 0 bigger than -1. Yes. So now be careful. This is the one, this is the test point, and this is the inequality I just graded. And my answer was yes, so I need to shade there. So that means this one needs to shade inside the parabola. So you need to make sure you're getting the points that are below this line, but at the same time inside that parabola, and that turns out to be all of these guys in here, just those guys in that little section in between, okay? So your answer to the question is like too many to list, so that's why you graph it. It's everything in this little region here, okay? All right, so that's pretty much how you do that. Number 11 just has a circle and a line, so you have to practice, get back up to speed on finding ordered pairs and getting those plotted. That pretty much ends the test 1 material. Okay, so make sure you know how to do questions 1 through 10, and you'll be good on the final with respect to the material from test 1.